High-speed police chases and wanton and reckless driving on the part of police kill hundreds of people, including law enforcement officials, alleged criminals, as well as innocent civilians every year in the United States. While authorities are engaged in high-speed police chases or pursuits, there can be complete disregard for the safety of other drivers as officers continue the chase well after the danger outweighs the need to apprehend the suspect. More people in the United States are killed by high-speed pursuits and wanton and reckless driving by the police than they are by police firearms. And yet these wrongful deaths from car accidents will likely continue year after year. That is why 2/3 of those injured or killed in fatal car accidents stemming from police chases or pursuits are innocent drivers and pedestrians that have nothing to do with the chase. In this insider exclusive investigative special, we go behind the headlines in police auto accidents, the Shirley Trent story, to examine how Jason Shartzer and Richard Cook, partners at Yosha, Cook, Schwartzer, and Tisch, successfully represented the Trent family in an extremely tragic accident that took the life of a really hard-working Shirley Trent, who early one morning, while driving her car on her daily route to deliver newspapers, was hit head-on at 94 miles per hour by Peru, Indiana police officer Rodney Richard, who was driving recklessly through the city streets with his emergency lights totally off, and more importantly, not in the line of duty. It's an accident that should have never happened. And it's an accident that the Peru, Indiana Police Department fought tooth and nail not to take responsibility for. But after 6 long years of courtroom battles, Jason Shartzer and Richard Cook finally got justice for the Trent family. Throughout their careers, Jason and Richard have earned reputations as unyielding advocates and lawyers who repeatedly represent individual men, women, and families against large corporations, and repeatedly win. Jason and Richard have earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as some of the best trial lawyers in Indianapolis, in Indiana, and across the nation, and have built substantial reputations nationwide by consistently winning cases other law firms have turned down. Jason's and Richard's spirit and dedication is often compared to President Teddy Roosevelt's when it comes to being in the courtroom in the arena they know so well. For as they often say, it is not the critic who counts, nor the man who points out how the strong man stumbled or the doer of deeds could have done it better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause, daring greatly so that his place shall never be amongst those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. Richard's and Jason's amazing courtroom skills and headline-grabbing success rate continue to provide their clients with the results they need and the results they deserve. Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive, live from Indianapolis, Indiana, at the law firm of Yosha, Cook, Shartzer, and Tisch. It is my great pleasure to introduce Jason Shartzer and Richard Cook to the show. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your firm. What type of law do you practice?
We primarily practice personal injury. We try to help people that are victims of wrongful acts by people. Some of them are unintended.
Yeah.
Other instances you can deal with conduct that approaches almost criminal conduct.
So usually it is not corporations, right?
Correct.
These are the individuals that are up against the David and Goliath kind of cases,
Exactly.
Right? And you could practice any kind of law. In fact, you were a federal prosecutor for a while, right? You were a
Correct.
state prosecutor too.
Correct.
So this kind of work is kind of in the same vein as what you're doing. You're representing the people, aren't you?
Right. We have to put together the case. We're not
Yeah.
taking it apart. And it's always tougher to put something together than it is to tear it down.
Right. And when you take on a case, if you lose it, not only does the client lose, but you also. So you have to be very careful about the cases you take on, right?
Correct.
As there are many type of law that lawyers can practice, some do practice corporate law. when you win a case, you have a great deal of satisfaction about getting some sort of justice?
Absolutely.
Yeah. This case today that we're going to be talking about, the Shirley Trent case, she was killed as a result of wanton and reckless driving of a police officer. But before we get into the case, tell us a little bit about who Shirley Trent was.
Shirley was a wife and a mother, very hardworking. She had 2 jobs, and one of the jobs that she had was delivering newspapers, and which most people know is done in the early morning hours.
Sure.
And that was what she was doing at the time this all took place.
And what was her other job? I'm just curious.
She worked at a pizza place.
Oh, so she was working more than 8 hours a day.
Sure, and in fact, on this particular day, she was planning on, after delivering the newspapers, going to make a Christmas meal for the employees at the pizza place. Hardworking.
Out of the blue, tell about the facts. What happened? Well, on December 21st, 2004, she's out delivering papers.
2:30 in the morning.
Correct. And police officer Rod Richard gets a call in the station along with other officers that were there for a 3rd shift meeting.
In another town.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, actually in Peru, but anyway, they're there at the meeting. He recognizes the address as being his parents' address.
Mm-hmm.
So he immediately calls the dispatcher and double checks the address and finds out, in fact, that it is his mom and dad's home, that this call for a potential suicide is made. And it's approximately 21 miles away.
And that was his brother, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
William Richard.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he gets permission from his supervising officer, supposedly, to go ahead and make this run. And he jumps into his squad vehicle and leaves and goes out Strawtown Pike, which is kind of a curvy, hilly road. It runs, in fact, along a golf course just outside of Peru city limits. He claimed that he was operating his vehicle with his siren as well as his lights, and then once he got into a residential area, he was operating it with only his emergency lights on.
Yeah.
That becomes critical because as he's leaving the limits of the city, he's out in this rolling country area. He's driving at a high rate of speed, approximately 94 miles an hour, and he crests a blind hill, ironically where there's a sign that says slow, and as he crests it, poor Shirley Trent's there delivering newspapers. She doesn't have a chance, and he hits her Cadillac DeVille and basically obliterates it. Both vehicles end up on the side of the road.
And as you're talking, we're showing photos of what happened to the car. Unfortunately, she died.
Correct.
Okay, and then it became a case of a wrongful death. And there were so many challenges in this case, and I want you to explain to our audience what those challenges were, because this case lasted 6 years, didn't it?
Sure.
And to me, when I first saw this case, because I saw that this case represents why you do what you do, why you represent these people, because this wasn't a big moneymaker. There was a cap of what, $300,000. This case took you 6 years, didn't it?
Yes.
To prosecute all the way to the end, to get a settlement, correct?
Correct.
So tell us the challenges that you faced and why you even took this case on to begin with.
Well, nothing about this case was easy from the very beginning. Initially filed the case in state court. The first judge that was assigned recused herself because of knowing the members of the police department that we were making a claim against. We initially just wanted to make a claim against the police officer in his individual capacity because he was going to a family member's house.
In other words, he was not in the line of duty.
That's
That was
what we
your claim.
initially alleged,
Yeah.
right. And the city fought us on that, saying that they should be joined in this because he was in the scope of employment.
Yeah.
And we argued that all the way through, and said at least it's a question for the jury to decide whether or not the police officer driving 24 miles away to his parents' home outside the city limits to a call that he was not requested to respond to is a personal mission, or is he acting as a police officer?
Right.
But the trial court disagreed with this and granted the individual officer's motion to get out of the case individually. We appealed that. The Court of Appeals ruled against us, and then took it all the way, petitioned it to the Indiana Supreme Court, and they denied review of it in a 3-2 decision. So we're ultimately stuck against making a claim against the Peru Police Department.
Yeah.
And with that comes the cap that you referred to earlier.
Yeah. So in essence, you could not sue the individual police officer in this case, because as you went up the ladder, you lost at every single level.
Every step.
Now, a lot of people would give up at this point in time, but you guys didn't. Why is that?
Well, it was the right thing to do. From the first time I heard the facts of this case, and as we did our investigation, it became clear that this police officer's conduct was beyond the pale,
Yeah.
and something needed to be done because this tragedy happened. Also, to help prevent this from ever happening again in the future, it was just the right thing to do.
Normally in a police chase or pursuit, if a officer is in the line of duty, it's next to impossible to sue them. You can sue them, but recover anything. But you were able to make a recovery in this case. Why?
Well, that is true. When you sue a police department or any other government entity, they're protected by a different standard of proof than regular individuals have with each other. You have to show that they're basically 100% at fault, or you get nothing. And that was a challenge in this case. There is an exception to that rule, and that's the willful and wanton conduct.
Yeah.
And in this case, we argued to the court and to the jury that the speed with which the officer was driving at the time he crested that blind hill, 94 miles an hour, was willful and wanton.
And also, he had his lights out.
Well, yeah.
The siren was
He
on.
had his headlights out,
Yeah.
and he had his interior lights out.
He had actually, what he had done, he claimed that he had turned off his interior lights, which would have shown how fast he was going.
Right.
His claim was that it was going to reflect onto his windshield, which was totally bogus because just as in any car, a Crown Victoria.
But his headlights were out too, right?
No, his headlights were on. Here's where the issue was this. He only had what they call takedown lights on in his headlights. Takedown lights essentially are spotlights that are part of the bar of lights on the top of a squad car. He had to have emergency lights on if he's going to be running in excess of the posted speed limit. In order to take advantage of the special protections that police officers are given to disregard the law.
Yeah.
And essentially, my focus when I got involved with the case was to look and establish that the officer was lying.
Lying about?
Lying about the lights being on.
Yeah.
The video that's taken by another officer, Matt Feller, who comes immediately on the scene after the accident.
Yeah.
You can see off onto the outer edge. We had that vehicle, and we actually did outtakes from the video, which showed that there aren't emergency lights on, they're takedown lights.
Yeah.
And that was important, one, to show how reckless his actions were, but two, to get him outside of the emergency response statute.
Yeah. Now, you brought up something about contributory negligence. Let's talk about that. Shirley Trent delivering newspapers, as we know, most newspaper delivery people often drive on the wrong side of the road. Why? Because they have to throw the newspaper, out in the driveway, and it's a lot easier to throw it when you're close to the driveway than across the street. She was actually driving down the wrong lane, wasn't she?
Yes, she was.
So when the police officer hit her, one of their defenses would have been, hey, she was on the wrong side of the street, it's her fault, correct?
That's absolutely what they said.
The way you overcame this is the wanton and reckless driving, correct?
Willful and wanton, yes.
Willful and wanton, yeah. And 94 miles an hour, lights out, excessive speed, and that sort of thing. And that's how you were able to successfully get justice for Shirley, wasn't it?
That was ultimately.
In these kinds of cases, and when someone comes to you and say, you know, police cases, when the police are involved, these are real difficult cases, aren't they?
They are.
Because they have this higher standard that you have the threshold, which you have to meet in order to sue them successfully, right?
That's correct.
When someone brings you a case, a police case, what is the criteria you look at?
I think you have to look myself at what the police officer did, what things in fact make sense. I typically will focus on the police reports themselves because a police officer, if he's a good officer, he's supposed to put all pertinent details in the report.
Yeah.
And in this case, for example, there were a lot of significant details that people came up with after the fact that didn't happen to make their report.
Right. Which you discovered.
Correct.
And you were a state prosecutor before, right?
Correct.
So you were aware of a lot of these things that should have been there, right?
Absolutely.
In any kind of case, when you're hiring an attorney, what do you look for to hire an experienced attorney? How do you know that the person that you hire is really going to go to battle for you?
I mean, I would look for somebody with a good reputation, experienced, a broad-based experience, and somebody that actually tries cases. And there's a lot of guys out there that hold themselves out as a trial attorney, and a lot of them don't even try cases.
Right.
So I think you want to look for people that are truly barristers, people that will get in the courtroom and fight for you.
And you would find that on your website, for example, right?
Correct.
Or asking around, and I think it's important because both you as well as, you know, Buddy have all been are in organizations, trial lawyers associations, named, you know, great attorneys and that sort of thing. That's what people ought to look at too, right?
Absolutely.
Because they see them, they have gotten verdicts, they've taken things to trial. I think, you know, for me, when I look at, if you're going to choose an attorney, you have to look at a law firm that's willing to spend the money to pursue the case, like this case. This case was not a big money maker per se, but it was a sense of justice. Did you feel that when you were handling the case?
And I mean, when you're, I think, fighting City Hall essentially,
Yeah.
I think it's particularly rewarding when you prevail because there are so many hurdles. And as I think Jason outlined, there was a fight in this case in state court, in federal court, all the way through the appellate court system to finally get the Trents their day in court and the justice really that they deserved.
Yeah, and actually it was, I think, one of the other officers, the defense witnesses, that kind of helped you in this case, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
His name was what again?
It was Trooper McCullough.
And he testified that he was able to basically contradict what the officer, Richard?
Well, yeah, Richard
was actually saying, right?
Well, and in fact, Richard took the position, well, I don't know how fast I was going, but I wasn't going 94 miles per hour. And he was able to utilize the physical evidence there at the scene and determine that the speed, in fact, that he crested that hill at was 94 miles an hour.
In this day and age, you know, when cases are brought to you, you are often, sometimes the insurance companies present you a settlement right away. How do you know what a good case is, and how do you determine whether you're going to take a settlement or not?
Well, you manage the risks associated with going to trial versus what your client will receive if there's a settlement.
And when you choose to represent someone, what is the criteria you look at? Is the client a real big criteria in terms of whether you like this person or not?
Well, yeah, that always helps if you've got a client who is a nice person, a hardworking person like Shirley Trent.
Because the jury is going to identify with that, correct?
Right. And I think it's important for you to feel that personal connection with them. So you are there fighting for them all the way through. And I mean, for me, I try to look for that personal connection with a client because I do think it's important.
I believe that some of the cases that you handle now change the procedure of what business is normal. Let's talk about the Peru Police Department. do they now have new policies so that this isn't repeated again?
It's hard to say. They haven't expressed what they've changed to us.
Yeah.
I would certainly hope so, and I can't imagine that they wouldn't have taken some measures after this case
Yeah.
for one thing, having family members in the department respond to emergency calls involving other family members. It seems that in and of itself is something that could lend itself to problems and
Yeah.
clouding of judgment.
I know following the actual close of evidence and final arguments, I spoke briefly with the chief of the Peru Police Department,
Yeah.
and he indicated to me that they were going to change some things. So hopefully the
Yeah.
case had that impact.
Well, that's good, and that's what all the cases should, and I want to thank both of you for successfully representing the Trent family. And I want to thank both of you for being on this program. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.